As I stood there at the gas pump, watching the numbers roll up, filling up my big diesel truck, I knew that when I put my debit card in that machine that there was probably $5 in my checking account. I also knew that I was creating an NSF fee and an overdraft fee and all kinds of other problems financially just by putting my debit card in that machine. But I was texting my wife telling her I'm overdrafting the account to fill up my truck because being at this event where I've been asked to come and help coach this class really fulfills me inside more than anything else. And I'm willing to mow lawns or do whatever I've got to do to make up the money to cover the cost of this. I was so jazzed to be invited to come and teach in a Dale Carnegie class as an assistant in the back of the room. I drove from way far north Fort Worth all the way over to Plano. I stopped and filled up my truck, and as I pulled into the building, there were no cars in the parking lot, which struck me as a little odd, but then I thought, I'm a little early, maybe it's just me and the other instructor. I went up and down the halls. I knocked on every door for the Dale Carnegie class, and no one answered. Finally, a little frustrated, I tried to call. I went back through my emails. I looked for the numbers. I couldn't find anybody, but I just kept knocking on that one door where class is usually held. And finally, from behind the door, I hear someone yell, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm here for the class." And he comes to the door and he says, we don't have class this week. It was canceled. Well, here I am all dressed up, coat and tie, and no place to go. And the one thing that I thought was going to give me that boost of energy, when our DJ business at the time was flat, it was summertime, there was no cash coming in. I had just been laid off from Verizon and we had no income coming in. And the only thing I had was just this hope of being useful. This surge of energy coming from behind that says there's some worth to your life. And then the rug was snatched out from under me. And emotionally, I was flat on my face. I got back in the car and I sat there and I cried for a couple of minutes and I called my wife and I said, I don't want to come home. I don't want the kids to see me like this. I am as close to useless as I've ever been. And as I started my drive back from Plano to Fort Worth, I passed a Barnes & Noble. And this was back in the day when it was pretty easy to find a big comfy chair in Barnes & Noble and you could sit down with a book and just read. And so I sat down with a book in my hand. It was a tiny little book called Effective Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie. And I read through that book for a while. I was there probably 2.5 hours, and I think I finished 9 pages. I was such an emotional wreck between the tears and the lack of concentration and the beating myself up. There was nothing that I could understand or comprehend or care about from that book. Now, I know you've never been that despondent. You've never been in the place in your life where you just feel like everything that could go wrong is just being heaped on top. But that's exactly where I was. Like every good thing in my life had been unplugged, and everything I could possibly wish to never happen was happening all at once. And as I sat there in Barnes & Noble that day, trying to gather myself to go home, trying to recollect who I really was, I finally got up, I went to the men's room and washed my face to get all the tears and snot off my face. And on the way back out, I stopped right outside the men's room door. And if you've ever been in South Lake, when you stop right there where the hallway for the restrooms come out, there's a row of books that faces you. You can't go anywhere until you turn right or left to get past it because you run right into a row of books. And I stopped right there and I just closed my eyes and shook my head. I was like, God, if there's something you're trying to tell me, I need to hear it now. You're going to have to speak up. And I looked up, and at the top of the bookshelf, the topic title for that category said self-help. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. And I said, all right, if you're going to play like that, then it better be in this book. And I blindly reached behind me, put my hand on the first book that I touched. I never looked back to see what it was. I didn't look at the title, as I said, and it better be on this page. And I flipped the book around and I opened it. And there, at the top of the page, now remember, I've been in the DJ business for about 4 years at this point. We've done hundreds of kids events since 1996. And at the top of this page, it says, we had a 5-year party. And I went, what? A 5-year party? That's a serious party. That wasn't what he was talking about. I flipped the page from the title page and I started reading the chapter. And he said, we had a party where we set our vision for what our life was going to be 5 years from now. We intentionally designed our own future. We said, I want to be doing this. I want to find these things in my life. I want to accomplish these goals in my life. I want to achieve these things in my life. And everyone who came to that party, when they came back 5 years later, found that everything they had described, 90+% of them, were living the life they had envisioned 5 years before. Wow! I realized right then, this guy knows something I don't know, and I need to know it. I looked at the back of the book. It said $39, and I went, I just overdrafted my account, putting fuel in my truck to go do something that isn't going to do me any good. And I got this $40 book in my hand, and I shoveled through all my pockets. I gathered up all my change. I had $2.78. And I made a decision. I took the book over to the big comfy chair where I'd been sitting. I left my backpack there. I went downstairs and I bought me a cup of coffee from Barnes & Noble, Cafe, Starbucks. And I went back upstairs to that comfy chair and I sat in that comfy chair and I read every word of that book that I could. I transcribed. I took pictures with my phone. I memorized phrases as much as I could get out of that book. And I did the same thing for the next 10 days. 2 weeks goes by. I get a phone call from Dale Carnegie's office. And they said, we want you to come back and teach this class. And I was beginning to feel kind of like George W. Bush. Fool me once, it's shame on, fool me again, and somebody's a fool anyway. But I went. I got dressed up, I got my coat and tie on, I drove my truck all the way across there, still had a little bit of fuel left from what I'd already bought. I walked in the door and sure enough, there it is, a full classroom, 35 or 40 people, smart looking instructor that I'd never worked with before. I walked in, I went to the back of the room and I said, hey Eric, I'm here to be your coach for the Dale Carnegie class. And he looked at me and goes, I've never worked with a coach. I don't know what you're here for. I don't know what you do. But if you know what you're supposed to do, you do what you're supposed to do. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. We'll get along just fine. So, okay. So I sat down and I started sorting papers and preparing the ballots and getting everything ready for the back of the room administration. And Eric went down the hall for a couple of minutes to prepare before the class started. Eric walks back in at like 7:58. Class starts at 8 o'clock. He walks right up to the desk. He leans down and he says to me, you know, the first thing that we have to do is vision. We have to help them prepare a vision for their future, to help them decide what their life is going to be. That's the first exercise in the Dale Carnegie program in Strictly Business. And I would love your help. I hear from our franchise owner that you're pretty good at the front of the room. I would love your help if you would stand up and kind of share your vision, and then I can teach it, because it's kind of confusing when I share my vision and then start teaching. It's hard to tell one from the other. And I said, sure, absolutely. I could hear the words coming out of my mouth. Sure, absolutely. I'll share my vision with them. And in the back of my head, I'm going, vision? Are you kidding? I don't have a clue. Why do you think I'm here? Why do you think I spent the last 10 days studying this book? I'm so despondent with my own life right now. I don't know where I'm going. And I walked to the front of the room confidently as if I knew what I was doing. One of the things I learned in that book was act as if. Act as if you know what you're doing. Act as if you belong here. Act as if this is the way you're supposed to be. Because sometimes it's the war inside our head that keeps us from succeeding. There's nothing around us that stops us. We have the right to be whatever God has made us to be. And so I took that bold confidence. I walked to the front of the room. No idea what was going to come out of my mouth when I got there. And I spun around on my heels and I looked at the crowd and I said, I'm walking out onto the stage and I can feel the music pounding in my chest. I can hear the roar of 5,000 people in the crowd. And they've all come here to hear me tell them what it means to live a more excellent life. And the 35, 40 people in the room just burst into applause. It was incredible. And I thought, that's awesome. I need to go write that down so I'll remember. And I ran back to the table and I wrote down 3 or 4 things. I said, I am going to make a career in public speaking. I am going to write a book. And I guess the title will be Live a More Excellent Life. I had never even pondered the thought of writing a book other than poetry before that moment. I had no idea what the title was going to be, but I felt like that's what I was told it was going to be. And by golly, that's what it is. I decided I would win a speech contest because otherwise nobody would know I was a good speaker. So I joined Toastmasters. I didn't even know if they had contests. But in 2011, I went to the World Championship of Public Speaking and I stood on the stage and I delivered a speech called Live a More Excellent Life. And I made it to the semifinals out of 35,000 contestants. I was one of the final 82. in August of 2011. Well, here we are in July of 2016. And I'm sure you're looking at everything I've said and the words on the screen, Insuperable, and asking yourself, what are the two having to do with each other? Well, I can tell you that on February the 12th of 2012, I stood in the driveway and I watched my bride walk down the driveway carrying her last little box of her most private possessions, all the breakables. Tears streaming down her face, the rain starting to fall, my kids in the backseat of the car, and my heart was crushed. 2 years after I wrote this vision, 2 years after I embarked on this journey, 1 year after I made it to the World Championship, less than a year, and only weeks before I went off to train with the John Maxwell team as a certified leadership coach. It looked like, again, someone was pulling to the fabric of my life. It was falling apart. We built this house. We're 7 years into a 15-year note. It's half paid for. But in a battle with Wells Fargo, we lost it. Thanks to the graciousness of a friend, we stayed in her house in the country in Oklahoma in a trailer house for 2 years. And we were able to put our lives somewhat back together to start over as God allowed us to rebuild. We went from there to a 600 square foot apartment, from there to an 1,100 square foot apartment, and then God. And in the midst of that journey, I wrote Live a More Excellent Life. In the midst of that journey, I learned what it meant to live a more excellent life. I learned what it means to have everything stripped away and still find value in yourself. To have everything ripped from you and still find the confidence to get up in the morning and go, I can do this and it's worth it. And I know if you've ever been there, you get up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm here, and I have no idea what I have to bring to this life. I've been there. I've done what you've done. I've cried myself to sleep. I've woken up in the middle of the night crying again. I've gone to work wondering if this will be the last paycheck. I know how you feel. I've been there. And in the midst of that, I started working on a program called the Insuperable Vision. Well, where did the word insuperable come from? That was an accident. Sitting in that little trailer in the country, I was browsing through my books in my library, and one of them happens to be a Noah's Webster dictionary from 1949. And this is no joke and no exaggeration. I flipped to the I's because I was trying to build an acronym for vision. V, it's got to be something. And then, but there's two I's. You got to find two powerful words for I, for vision, for an acronym for vision. So I had to have two I's. And as I was scrolling through the I's, I came across this word, insuperable. Yes, it's real. It's in the dictionary, and I didn't make it up. And here's what the 1949 Noah's Webster's dictionary definition of insuperable was. Something not easily overcome, overwhelmed, or passed by. As an example, it used the Berlin Wall. Now, since that book was written, we all know the Berlin Wall has been torn down between East and West Germany. The famous words of President Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. But I held on to those words. And I realized that not easily overwhelmed, overcome, or passed by had described and defined the last 28 months of my life at that point. That the train wreck that my life had become, losing everything that I thought was going to be awesome, and watching it fall apart as life just heaped onto me. I felt like the phoenix rising from the ashes. I read that word insuperable and I said, that's going to be me. I will not let go of that. And then I realized that there was a partnering between the meaning of that word. I refuse to be overwhelmed. I refuse to be overcome, and I will not be passed by. I won't be passed by for opportunity. I won't be passed by for chance to love. I will not be passed by for a chance to be loved. I will not tolerate being passed by and ignored. I will do what I'm here to do, and I will not sit silently in the corner while someone else does what I was called to do. And I set my feet firmly on the ground. I set my face like flint. And then I realized that I wouldn't even have the determination to be there doing what I was doing if I didn't have a vision. If God hadn't given me that vision inside my head, and the minute I turned around to that classroom and said, I'm going to do this, If those things had not happened, the journey even up to that point would have been moot. I would not have done any of the things that it took to get there. I would not have joined a Toastmasters club. I would have not gotten my competent communicator in less than 4 months. I would not have advanced far enough in competitions and in diligence to compete in the World Championship. It wouldn't have happened. I would not have saved up the money to join the John Maxwell team. My family agreed to go 11 months with no heat or AC in our home to pay for the certification with the John Maxwell team. That's not an easy sell, my friends, not in Texas. But it was a buy-in from the whole team. If we're going to get from where we are, from this slump, from the bottom of the barrel, from fighting every day to get by, to where God's called us to be, we're going to have to make some sacrifices. And we did. And we paid the price again and again and again. And we're not done. There's still greater price to be paid. There's still more sacrifices to be made. There's still more to be accomplished. We're not finished yet. We're not even started. But we are determined because we are insuperable. And when you marry those two things together, the vision that says, I see what 5 years from now could be like. I see it. I see the picture of it happening. I've crafted this picture in such a way that when I pass by it on the highway, I'll go, look, there's our vision. It's coming to pass. We've reached that place. Now what's next? That vision is so clear that it has helped us to become insuperable. Now, if you're a leader, whether it's your family, your church, your team, a company, a government, and you are easily overwhelmed, insuperable is not your attitude. If you're easily overcome, insuperable is not your attitude. If you're easily passed by, insuperable is not your attitude, but you need to change that. Here's a couple of the phrases that you might hear. That's a major setback. It's not the end of the world, and success awaits. When you can convince yourself that that's true and act as if it's true, because it is, this is not the end of the world, this is a minor setback, success awaits me. When you can say that confidently in the mirror, write it on the mirror if you have to, get somebody else's lipstick, write it on your mirror, and read it to yourself every day. This is a minor setback, this is not the end of the world, and success awaits. It will allow you to see every problem that comes as the molehill that it is, not a mountain you can't overcome. If you choose to be insuperable, you will not be easily overwhelmed, overcome, or passed by. And that, my friends, is a choice. It's an attitude. It's a feeling. It's an emotion. It's a thought all blended together that says, I choose my thoughts to be insuperable. I choose my emotions to be insuperable. I will not allow you to overcome me, to overwhelm me, or to pass me by. Now, that doesn't mean that you arrogantly take assertions that are not yours, but it does mean that you confidently hold on to what is. And that takes grit. That takes passion. That takes a vision. If you're curious, if you'll go to excellentlifeleadership.com under the How to Connect with Loren tab, there's a store. And in fact, I think if you're on my Facebook page on Tell It Like It Is, the product is there as well. It tells that same story in full of how God developed the vision in me and what we did to walk it out and how those encounters happened. And then it walks you through the acronym of how to develop an insuperable vision for your own life. How do you create a vision that when you get that picture in your head, it's like a beacon, it's like a radar for you. It's like setting your GPS in your phone. I know my destination, now you tell me how to get there. And when you have that picture concrete in your head, when you have a look of what your destiny is going to be, it's a whole lot easier to find it. That destination is so important. What does it look like? What will it feel like? How committed will I be? How passionate will I be when I pull this off? But you've got to have an insuperable attitude to get there. And you've got to have a vision married up with that. That CD training is right there on the Tell It Like It Is page. I would love for you to have that. You can order it right there and we'll send it to you. But get insuperable in your attitude. Choose to be insuperable in your attitude. Choose to stand up for what you know is yours. And develop a vision for your life that drives you through the hardest times. When the rug's been pulled out, when the banking account is empty, when you have no idea where the next check is coming from, don't quit. Choose success. Choose to speak life to yourself. Choose to speak positive of your own future, because nobody else can. It's you. It's all on you. God has guaranteed you nothing, not even your next breath. But in Him we live and move and have our being, and that confidence that says, I trust God to drive me through this, and I trust that if I do my part, He'll do His part. He is Jehovah Jireh, not you. And trust me when I say he's got this. There's nothing coming against you that he can't handle, that he hasn't already beat. But that's up to you, and that's a choice. Not easily overcome, overwhelmed, or passed by. I remember reading one time, Thomas Edison said, I did not fail 10,000 times at creating a light bulb. I found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. Or 10,000 other things to make besides a light bulb, perhaps, would be an equal answer. So here's my challenge for you today. Will you choose? Will you declare, I will not be easily overcome, overwhelmed, or passed by? Do you have a vision for your life that will drive you through all of the things that could go wrong? Have you set yourself up for success? Do you have a vision, a picture in your head of what it will look like when you win? Can you feel it in your chest? Then you're well on your way, and I'm behind you 100%. I am J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.